Welcome to Photoeye Conversations. Tonight, we're joined by Steve Fitch, and we're going to do a virtual walkthrough of Steve's online exhibition, American Motel Signs II. If this is our first time meeting, I'm Photoeye's gallery director, Ann Kelly. Thanks for joining us tonight, Steve. Are you in your studio this evening?
I am in my studio out on our land. I have two studios, one in town and one out here on the land. And there's a ping pong table right there, which is basically not used for ping pong. It's used for laying prints out. There's all these boxes. I sort things on it. And I have a board back there where I can pin photographs up to look at them. And my studio in town is where I have my printer. You know, I can work on things on the computer out here, do a lot of stuff. But when I want to print, I do that in town. So I kind of live in two worlds here.
The ping pong table is handy, and if you felt like playing ping pong,
it can be easily moved. They can be moved off. But one thing I've done during the pandemic, actually, like a lot of people, I think, is I took it as an opportunity to organize prints. And I spent several months just going through boxes, seeing what I had, organizing stuff. So in a room that's kind of back through those doors, I have almost all my prints are stored out here. A good use of the pandemic, actually.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a good sense of what I have, and I labeled things better. You know, I like to be organized.
Last summer, we did another Zoom talk, and at that time, you were currently working on American Motel Signs II. Now it is here. So that happened in this past year.
Yes. It was on my part, it was getting, the images and making good files of them. The book was done in collaboration with Iana de Friane, who's the publisher at Velvet Cell.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never talked to him on the phone, never met him. So it was all done, email, basically. So of these pictures, I have a lot of the motel sign photographs I made over the years. Basically started in 1979. I changed from black and white, like Diesels and Dinosaurs, started working in color, 2 1/4, Hasselblad. And so since 1979 until today, I have a whole inventory of pictures I made that I like. So my challenge for Iana was to basically edit the pictures to consider. For the volume number 1, first of all, and then when it came to number 2, a set of the pictures I would select for 2, and we're going to do a volume 3. So I went through and probably picked out 70 more pictures, which then for me is a matter of working on them, getting the color balance, working on them digitally. But I would like to, usually I would make a small print just to see how the print looked before I then sent him the files.
Full prints and put them on the ping pong table?
Yeah, on the ping pong table. And at my desk in the house where I read and do things, I have a piece of glass there. And I love when I'm working on a print, I put it behind the glass and sit there and I can look at it. So that's where I view images a lot at night. I like looking at prints I'm making behind glass. I have a glass fetish. And, I'm not one of these people that is really into mounting photographs and showing them not behind a piece of glass. I really like glass. So, I pin them up on that board back there to look at them. I lay them on the ping pong table, especially when I'm working on sequence for like the book, where we were going to use 32 pictures. And volume 1 had 32. This was going to have 32. So I'll lay them out a lot, the sequences. But, to tell you the truth, Iana was more responsible for the sequencing. And out of the 70 pictures, he selected 32 he liked, and then had me respond to those. And I would make a few changes or suggest some changes, and then toss that back to him. And then he did a sequence. And he has an assistant too, who they worked on it together. And then he would email me the sequence. And again, I'd make a change or two, but I liked having somebody else, in a way, be involved in selecting the images. You know, I would make the first selection of one group to pick from. I like having somebody else actually do that too. And even maybe take more responsibility than me, picking the images and sequencing. And I think that's come about over the years, just in doing several books, realizing that it's a collaboration. And I like that part of it. You know, Diesels and Dinosaurs, it was where it began. And again, I picked a lot of the pictures, but then I had input from Richard Mizrak, Roger Minnick, Sam Seymour, friends that were around the studio in Berkeley where I was working, who threw in their 2 cents. And then Roger Minnick especially helped me with the sequence, although it was still mostly my idea. Like in Diesels and Dinosaurs, you know, we go from day to night. There is a kind of thing happening. There'll be a lot of times a billboard about dinosaurs, and then there'll be a real plaster dinosaur. So there's a kind of back and forth between signs and something else. There's a sort of Beauty and the Beast theme running through Diesels and Dinosaurs. So that was primarily mine, but I liked input from other people. Gone was completely my sequencing. I had input from editors at UNM Press about some images they didn't think I should use and some they thought I should. Dana Asbury, for example, gave input. But I struggled with the sequence in Gone. How was I going to put these together? There's 70 pictures, I think. And unlike Diesels and Dinosaurs, it goes from day to night. I didn't know how to do it. And I don't know how it happened, but the idea occurred to me, what about just the sequence that I took them in? You know, I worked on that project for 10 years, 11 years, 1991 to 2002. And I think I'd seen somebody else's book that they did that. I don't remember. So then I started putting them in that order, and I liked it. And that's the order. And Gone is really, it's chronological.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, that is one of the bigger challenges is sequencing. And I mean, that can really make all of the difference. And then also just editing your own work. So it is nice to collaborate with other people.
Yeah, I've never been adverse to that. And titles is another one. Diesels and Dinosaurs. I was trying to decide, what am I going to call this book? And I had a sheet of paper and just started writing down words, phrases. Somehow I had dinosaurs, diesels, highway, you know, various titles. And there on that sheet, somewhere down the list, Diesels and Dinosaurs. And I got, wow, I like that. And I ran that by Richard, I think, and Roger, and it just clicked. People liked that title. And to this day, I still think I love that title.
It's kind of perfect.
Gone, it was different. An editor at UNM Press, I called the Gone pictures the archaeology of abandonment. They'd roll their eyes and they go, this is not a scientific book. And that had been the working title for like years. I just called these my archaeology of abandonment pictures. They did not want to do that. And one of the book designers, I think Robin Mundy, although I'm not sure, it might have been Ed Schlotter, came up with Gone one day and ran it by me. And at first I go, Gone?
That's not what it's called.
I don't, what? And I really wasn't that crazy about it. And But I came around after a couple of days. I go, okay, they're probably right. It's a better title in a way for selling a book. And the subtitle is Photographs of Abandonment on the Great Plains. Still not archaeology of abandonment.
Right.
And in Kathleen Howe's essay, she does mention how I was calling it the archaeology of abandonment. And she kind of works on that a little bit. So anyway, and now to this day, I really like the title Gone, actually. And so there's an idea or an example of it was somebody else's idea, not mine.
But based upon your ideas.
Based on pictures.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And with Vanish and Vernacular, the same thing. I don't know what I was calling that, but it was Joanna that came up with that title. When David and I were looking at the pictures, sequencing, somehow she came up with that. And David right away liked the alliteration of it. They both really liked it. Again, I wasn't sure. I mean, it was really catchy.
Have you
but
grown
I didn't
to that?
other options, and I came around to that one too. I said, okay.
Well, and then American Motel Signs, that's pretty straightforward. It's a good title. It's what it is.
Yeah, there is another small little book that Nazraeli Press did, one of their one picture books.
Right.
Of the motel signs, 10 of them, I think 10 or 12, and just called Motel Signs.
Right.
And the reason these books, the Velvet Cell books, happened, this was the volume 1, was actually Iana saw the Nazraeli book and he really liked it. And he contacted me and said, do you want to do another motel sign book? And he introduced himself, said who he was, said the name of his press, which was pretty new at that point. And said he was a photographer also. He's Irish, he went to graduate school in London, I think. And he started the Velvet Cell because he was not seeing the kinds of photo books that he liked, the subject material he liked, which was he's really into urban cities. Although he's done a number of books, including mine, that are really not that. But if you look at their catalog or their inventory, their books, they are cities, a lot of Asian cities. At the time, he was living in Japan and in Taiwan. So he approached me and said, I saw your Nazraeli book, I'd sign book, and I'd really like to do some of those. Are you interested? And I said, well, okay, what are you thinking? And he told me one of the things he was saying he wanted to do is the size of the book was small, like the Nazraeli book. And that's his books, most of them are small. And it has to do partly with economics. It makes them more feasible to produce. And again, at first I was resistant to that idea. I said, we're going to do a book and let's do a big book.
Yeah.
But, partly because he was, for the first volume, paying for more than half of it, most of it, this and that reason. And he gave me all the reasons he thought it was good.
Well, and it also makes them, well, typically they're maybe a little more affordable to the buyer as well. I believe these are currently $35.
Yeah, I think the first one was 25 or something. Maybe.
Yes, and until it was almost out of print.
Right.
And then I think it got up to about 75 or so. So these are still at 35.
Right.
For now.
Well, and again, I've come around to the idea. I like the size actually. And they're not using all this paper. They're not, I look at a lot of these big books now and they're kind of extreme in a way. So that's another thing. I've kind of come around to his thinking. There's something nice about them. I remember Vicky had looking at this. She goes, "It's just a sweet little book."
It is, and not that larger books aren't objects, but there's something just kind of refreshing about this. And
the reference I like that I've come to like since is actually Ed Ruscha's little books, 26 gasoline stations, which I have, it's a little book. And,
right. Well, and I like how at Velvet Cell, they're doing the collection of 3 different books and that they're all the same scale and they're different colors, and same with the whole Nazraeli collection as well. We have a whole shelf here, well, over in the bookstore that has dozens of the little Nazraeli books. And
yeah, I think those are great. As Paul Kopeikin said to me, Chris at Nazraeli Press, it was a stroke of genius for him to come up with the one picture books. Paul thought that was a really good idea. And now he's doing the second 100 books, I guess.
oh, is he?
I think so.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. And speaking of little prints, at Photoeye, we also have an exclusive small print that can be purchased alongside of the book.
Again, that's Nazraeli's idea. With the one picture books, you get a little print.
Right. And those were typically tipped into the back, but I've seen a few new ones recently where they're not tipped in. And one arrived the other day that was actually, I don't recall which one it is, but it wasn't bound in a traditional sense, and the whole book kind of folded out to one large image. So they seem to be exploring and doing.
Yeah, all the first 100 were, I think, tipped in. Mine was tipped in.
Yes.
500 books, so that meant 500 prints had to be made. He knew a printer in Portland that would do that, so I didn't print those. I made a good print of how I wanted it to look and sent that to him, which I'm glad, because it was actually a type C print. It's not a digital print. And I wouldn't have been able to print them because at that point I didn't have my wet color darkroom anymore.
Well, and they're usually rather small too. So that would be a pretty intense project, printing all of those at that scale.
This printer who did it on type C in chemistry, I don't know what the paper is, I forget. It's Fuji, must be Fuji. He would get a whole bunch of them on a sheet. So each sheet would have, I don't know, maybe 32 prints or 24, and then they would cut them.
That makes sense.
I didn't have to do that. I did have to sign them all, which wasn't that bad.
Right.
Copies.
They have a system for that. So another good example.
I signed them, but my hand starts to cramp. I think I did 50 a day or something.
Well, that's significant. So in honor of the new American Motel Signs book, we at Photoeye put together an online exhibition of the work. Shall we take a look at that?
Sure.
So I love this little detail. It says, "Click to go down the road."
Yeah, I like that. I don't know whose idea that was. Yours?
I believe that was Rickson,
Yeah,
but I thought it was a nice detail.
I like that touch. So should we do that? This picture, it's interesting the way Iana sequenced the book. This is the first picture, and then the night one is the last.
So one of the things I was noticing between American Motel Signs I and American Motel Signs II is the span of time is a little bit longer. The American Motel Signs I was 1980 to 2008, but volume 2 goes actually all the way to 2018, which is relatively recent. So,
on this trip I'm taking next week, I might come upon a motel sign that interests me. They're becoming fewer and farther between. But I hope after this trip, I might be able to go all the way up to 2021.
I was wondering about that. Maybe American Motel Signs 3 will get a 2021.
Could, if I find one, or rephotograph one I've already photographed. In fact, I know I'm going by one that I made a picture of in 1987, I think. We'll see. Yeah. It's probably gone. It's probably not there. But like I said in things I've written, most of these are not there. Like this one in Albuquerque, World Motor Inn, that's long gone. I love this picture, both the daytime and the nighttime. I do night pictures, but they're not all night pictures. There's probably way more day pictures I make. I'm traveling mostly during the day, and a lot of times I'm trying to get somewhere, and I can't wait around all the time tonight. And over time, I realize I don't necessarily always want to photograph at night anyway. Sometimes I think the neon can get a little repetitive. So I don't really necessarily feel it. Early on, I kind of kept thinking, God, I got to come back to this one and do it at night. But one thing I realized is that the signs are made to function at night and during the day. They have to do both. At night, it's the lighting, especially the neon, that presents the sign. But during the day, the neon doesn't do it. So it's how the sign is painted, designed, and so that's partly what happens in a lot of these pictures. It's like the daytime ones. It's not the neon anymore, although the neon glass sometimes still actually has a presence even during the day.
Well, and you bend a little bit of neon yourself. That makes me think, is that something you take into consideration with your neon projects, what it's going to look like during the day, even if it's not a sign necessarily?
A little bit, not as much as the signs, because I'm not painting the background behind my neon pieces for the most part.
Right. Different intention.
But I did become very aware, like the grasshopper piece that's in this show, right? Me taking a picture of the grasshopper, the neon grasshopper.
Yes.
That's a piece I made. And that's right outside here. That's over on a water tank. If you look at it, a lot of the glass is colored glass. And so if it's colored glass, it does have a presence during the day. And I guess I didn't paint behind the signs, but I did become aware of how the glass, I really like the way the glass actually can look when it's off. Like the grasshopper, if you look at that, it's real neat. Just the glass is such a beautiful material, even when it's not lit up. So I'm aware of that in terms of the glass, but I don't paint. I'm wanting to do another neon piece that's going to have a neon yucca that I'm going to model on the yucca that used to be on the Yucca Drive-In on Cerrillos Road in Santa Fe.
Yes.
It was a beautiful yucca, especially the original version. The last couple of years of the drive-in, they had repaired it and mounted it on plywood, I think, and it wasn't near as good. Luckily, I had an 8x10 picture I took of it during the day, and it shows that yucca really nice, and I can use it. I'm going to crop it and blow it up, and I'm going to make my yucca based on that yucca.
Well, that'll be great. I look forward to
that.
seeing.
I may mount it and have the back, like the sign on the yucca, it is painted behind it. And I may have hire Lynn to maybe paint the yucca.
Oh, there you go.
We'll see. But anyway.
So we're still in Albuquerque, 1980.
Yeah, I like the sign. And
and
there, again, you can see the daytime, this is functioning really well during the day. And then at night, it would be different. But just in terms of letters, the way they paint the letters, the white LODGE with the black border, I love that. So I became very conscious of, letters, especially, and how, the different styles of neon letters. This, for example, is a block letter. Each of those on Lodge is a block letter, whereas Motor is not a block letter. It's what's called single stroke. And so, and partly because I was doing a neon sign business also, I became really tuned in to type.
Which was inspired by photographing these motel signs.
Yeah, exactly.
Your neon sign bending. Yes.
Yeah, when I was photographing special diesel dinosaurs, I started photographing neon and started noticing and started appreciating the material. And one thing led to another. I go, I want to learn how to do this so I can make my own neon pieces. And that's what I did. It took me a while to find somebody to teach me. But in 1981, I learned how to bend. Although learning how to bend takes several years, actually.
Oh, I'm sure.
And the reason I started a business was people kept coming to me. I'm making my own pieces like radiation pines and then Say-No-Matic. And people would go, hey, can you make me a blah, 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 blah. So when my job at Princeton ended, we moved back to Santa Fe in 1990. And David Scheinbaum hired me to teach at the College of Santa Fe. Originally, Dick Cook wanted to hire me to teach neon because the College of Santa Fe had a little neon shop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was in the sculpture barrack. And the class never happened, but I ended up using that shop for 2 years or so before I had my own shop. And about the time I got my own shop in 1992, 93, I opened a business and I did neon commercially for a couple of years. So I applied, it's kind of funny. I ended up making the signs like I photographed. Not exactly, because I didn't have a metal shop and I wasn't a full-fledged sign shop.
Right. You didn't actually make any motel signs, or did you?
No.
No.
Did I? No.
Never.
No,
never
mostly window signs you would do mount on plexiglass a lot of times, and they would be hung in the business's window like a restaurant, what was called window neon. I did a number of those, and I started bending for artists like Terry Allen. I did a lot of work for Terry Allen.
And you've described these motel signs as a form of folk art.
Right, which I think they are. Commercial folk art, I guess you'd say.
Sure.
And that started with a professor I had at University of California, Berkeley, who taught, my major ended up being anthropology. He was an anthropology professor who specialized in folklore. His name's Alan Dundes. And he had this class, Introduction to Folklore, which was one of the most popular classes on campus. I mean, there'd be 500 people at his lectures. And most of what he went over was oral and written folklore. Like he would do a whole lecture on ethnic jokes.
Wow.
And he would tell the jokes, and they were sometimes a little inappropriate. But his purpose was to then analyze, the cultural stuff behind the jokes. So anyway, he taught that class. The final project you had to do was collect 30 pieces of folklore. Most of the students collected oral or written folklore. I did a project, of photographs, photographic, and I was starting to work on diesels and dinosaurs by then, highway pictures. And so ever since Alan Dundes in that class, all my work, I've really kind of thought of me partly as a folklorist. And so this Cactus Motel, yeah, it's a piece of folklore, really. It's all the pictures I make that are in these two books, all the pictures I've made of signs for the most part. They're not your franchise signs. They're not Holiday Inns, Motel 6s, where, there must be, 500 Motel 6 signs, all the same, all over the country. One of those that I actually liked was the Holiday Inn, the classic Holiday Inn sign, which I did photo those.
Yeah, it had kind of more of the handmade artisan.
Handmade, yeah, it had a kind of folklore look. I mean, it was sort of influenced, I think, by all the kinds of signs I've learned. So a sign like this one, some of them are kind of crude. They're not always like this one. I wouldn't put in my Hall of Fame as the nicest example of a folk art sign, although I like it okay. But they're designed by a local sign shop with skilled people, the neon bender, the metal worker who would make what they call the tin can, the metal structure that the neon's mounted on, the sign painter who would paint the sign, and then the crew that would go install it. These were mom and pop, many times, sign companies in all over the country. So they're one of a kind, or at most there maybe be two. A given motel might have two signs. Totally different than the franchise sign or the sign you started to find all along the interstates. You know, the interstates kind of went hand in hand with the franchise era.
I would be surprised to see this exact Cactus Motel sign anywhere else. Maybe another Cactus Motel, but
there are other Cactus Motels, but they'll have their own version of the cactus.
yeah.
And like the first one, the World Motor Inn, or whatever, a round sign. What a crazy title for a motel, for one thing. And another thing about the pictures of mine, like in these two volumes and in Vanishing Vernacular, is a lot of times the name of the motel or something on the sign refers to the location, to the place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not always, like this one, not necessarily, but the cactus, you know, that's in Albuquerque, it's in the desert. So the cactus refers to, but sometimes even more specifically than that, the name of the motel or something about the sign refers to the locale,
Mm-hmm.
which, you know, again, with the franchise signs, the interstate signs, that's really not the case anymore at all. So again, all back to the idea of folklore. I mean, I think they're made by these local craftspeople who took pride most of the time in what they did. A lot of times, some of these companies were starting to get big enough where they could have a designer working there for them also. More often, it was the owner maybe of the company, sign company, who actually designed the sign and fabricated. So.
I love the little "Take Care Now" addition to this one.
The addition on this, and I think that was probably added later.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing you can see in a lot of these signs. Things get added and taken off through time. They evolve. Some that where it says television on the original sign.
Mm-hmm.
Television. You know, eventually they didn't even necessarily put TV on the sign anymore because people expected to have TV.
Right.
But then they would start to have color TV would be there,
Right.
or HBO, or and then as it continues till today, it'll Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see some of these signs, and some of the ones I photographed, you'll see the original sign maybe made like this one. There you go. That sign was made probably in the late 40s, early 50s. And you can see Visa, MasterCard, that gets added on. The message board, AAA, very clean, that probably got added on.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see what was probably the original structure. And so these signs a lot of times are kind of like, they accumulate barnacles in a way. They start accumulating these other things that start to attach. Although usually you can still see the original structure, and that can kind of date it. And you know, and another thing you'll notice in this one, which I love, notice how the structure of the sign comes out of that glass block and brick structure.
Mm-hmm.
That you'll see a version of that on most of these signs. A lot of it at times it's just a little bunch of rocks that are laid on the ground that circle it. But as you look at these pictures, that's a motif that really is in probably the majority of these signs. This kind of structure it comes out of.
Was there a kind of era that you noticed where they started adding the glass blocks around the base, or were you saying you thought that was original?
I would say the glass blocks is probably 40s, early 50s, the modern era. You know, a certain streamline, certain kind of architecture, which I think might have started as early as the 30s, but 40s. I'd say the glass blocks, 40s, 50s. You know, you'll notice in Vanishing Vernacular, there's one La Mesita Motel, 8x10 camera I used at night. Beautiful glass block structure in that picture. You know, so, well, we'll see. I mean, we'll probably get to a sign where it gets more flamboyant. The structure started getting way more flamboyant. big swooping arrows. Not this one, this is still the 40s. The 40s tended to be what they call suitcase signs, just kind of a rectangle. Yeah, that's getting more, what's the word, sculptural, I guess. 50s, moving away from just the rectangular shape.
And this capture is a little more recent. It's 2002.
Yeah, it's still there too, this one. I think.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah. And again, typeface, talking about typeface.
Mm-hmm.
You know, look at the lodge, it's a block letter, but it's kind of wavy.
Mm-hmm.
Blue is script letters.
Mm-hmm.
Spruce is not script letters, it's single stroke. Script letters, by the way, as a neon bender, are the hardest. And when I was at my peak, and I am way past my peak in terms of being a skilled neon bender. When I was at my peak in the 90s, I did some script letters. I did one sign for a movie production, High-Low Country, that was being filmed. 14-inch letters, it said lollipops. And oh boy, I took a lot of pride in that. Script letters, lollipops. I'm really rusty now, and I'm past my prime. But at any rate, to do script letters, it's hard. It's really hard.
Well, I would imagine if you're not doing this every day, then, I mean, you're no longer running the business doing it. Now it's really just for fun, right?
Yeah. Although people are still coming to me wanting me to do commercial work for them.
Oh, I'm sure.
Zach Scheinbaum, who's opened a tattoo place
Mm-hmm.
on Marcy Street, called me a while back. And, you know, would I make him a neon sign? And I had to say, no,
Yeah.
I have to go to Albuquerque. I'm too rusty. And, you know, I'm 71. My eyesight's not quite as good because you're having to bend and see the bending, and then your hand coordination. You know, it's a little harder for me, but I'm just out of practice. If you're doing it every day, you stay in form and shape, and, you know, and yeah, I don't bend enough. I'm too rusty. So that's a problem. But I went in last Friday I'm making Travis, my son, a neon arrow for his birthday. And I actually was doing okay. I was thrilled.
Well, we enjoyed having the neon arrow at photoeye as long as we did.
Yeah, and I will get you another one at some point, but yeah, I'm making no promises. Part of the problem is I go into my studio in town, which is also where my neon shop is, and I just usually have too much photography stuff I got to be doing.
Sure.
And now it's starting to get hot, and, you know, neon is really a winter sport.
I could see that.
You're standing on these flames, you know, and bending neon, it gets hot. Okay, this is starting to be a 50s sign. The way the motel, it's kind of this cantilevered. And then this is a common motif you a lot of times see, the artist's palette.
Mm-hmm.
The trail in is in that artist's palette. It's kind of cool.
And I'm noticing we have a Best Western in the background there.
Right. Although the sign is, again, it's one of these mom and pop signs.
Right.
Best Western is one of these chains that would take over a lot of these, buy up these mom and pop motels and put their imprimatur on them. And so it's kind of a cross between the total you know, chain motel and the total mom and pop. If you get what I'm saying. So, but look at the crazy things. You know, this is a good example of what I tried to do in these photographs. I think it's not always apparent, but, you know, usually the sign is sort of in the center of the picture, almost always. But I am paying attention to the space around the sign. And I want there to be a certain kind of amount of breathing room. And I also am paying attention to what else is in the picture. So I think of these compositions as being, you know, I think a lot of people that photograph these things, they just come right in on the sign, take a picture of the sign, and they're not really paying much attention to structuring the whole image. And I am, so for example, you do have the Best Western sign back there. You have these two crazy things on each side of the driveway coming in, these, I don't know what they are, like two towers with neon on them right there.
Are those I mean, not, obviously they're not attached to the sign, but
They're separate, but
part
they
of
would
the
be,
same design, you're pulling in at night and,
yeah, and they show you the entrance. And they're
right,
lit up.
right. And that car in the background is kind of perfectly placed and almost kind of
I
matches the
not
sign.
perfectly, but I am noticing everything like that.
Yeah. There was one a few back where it looked like there was a buffalo that was going to jump off the top of a roof.
The
I
Mile
remember
High.
that. Yeah.
Buffalo in the background, which I like.
I
And then the thing about Mile High, that one, we think of Denver as the Mile High city.
right.
That actually was in Custer, South Dakota. So Custer, South Dakota must be 5,280 feet tall elevation. They consider themselves Mile High.
So this one's 2011. So getting,
Yeah,
I guess it's 10 years ago, but a little more recent.
Yeah, although the motel was gone. This sign is abandoned. It's an artifact. Most of them we've seen were still functioning at the time I photographed, although not all of them. And you'll see in the books, some of them, like this one, it's actually an artifact. The motel's closed.
Well, and there's a number of these around the country where they've become a landmark and
right.
stick around after the motel. We got to keep that sign in Espanola for quite a while up until
right. Although a lot of them, and this is good, I think, are getting collected.
Mm-hmm.
Like Arrow Motel in Espanola, is in the museum in Albuquerque.
Right.
Which I'm not sure that neon museum is open yet. It was going to open, but then the pandemic hit.
Right.
It's started by the Garcia brothers, who their father did Garcia Motors. And it was because of actually the guy Tom Hyland, who came to the opening I had at Photoeye in 2018
Mm-hmm.
for Vanishing Vernacular. He came to that opening and he saw the picture of the Arrow Motel. And he was telling me about the Garcia brothers opening this museum. And he knows them because they've hired him as the sign painter to restore some of the signs they get. I told him, I said, you should tell them about the Arrow Motel because it's sitting there and somebody needs to get it. He went and got it. They got it.
Oh, wow. I did not know that story at all.
It should be going to be in that. It's going to be in the museum, I assume. In fact, I've been meaning to take a print of the Arrow Motel that I have down to give them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully that'll open soon if it hasn't already.
And along the lines of that, there are starting to be more and more neon museums around the country. My good friend Lenny Davidson, who the book is dedicated to, Lenny founded the Philadelphia Neon Museum 40 years ago. He's one of the first to do it. And, there's now a neon museum in Phoenix, Las Vegas, Wisconsin, Cincinnati. There's starting to be a whole bunch of them, actually. Skyview, Las Vegas, look at that. That's a 50s sign. 50s getting just kind of more flamboyant. So even though these signs are made, like I said, by individual sign companies, it isn't to say that these individual companies scattered all over the country aren't paying attention to national kinds of things.
Right.
So they were getting influenced by the kind of Art Deco happening in the country. And in the 50s, French words became popular. So you started having Capri motels.
Right.
And Capri pants. And, so like in Raton and Vanishing Vernacular, there's the Capri Motel. It's the title, it isn't actually in the picture, but you see the star on the hill. That was the Capri Motel.
Right. And they believe it was the Capri Motel. The current owners actually ended up adding the original diamond details to the front of the hotel based upon your photograph.
In Raton, did they? Well, they
I
caught the woman that bought that. I
yes,
saw my picture somewhere.
yes, yes.
Maybe she came into your gallery. I'm not sure. And
Yeah,
and,
I
and
ended up.
contacted me and said we bought the Capri Motel and they've changed the name and they were trying to update it and turn it into a little boutique motel, which they've done. Last I saw it. I've
Yeah,
never met her.
they hired a local woodworker to redo the little diamond wood pieces that were original, because I guess those had been taken off by the time they bought it, and they added those back. Thanks to you.
Yeah, and I gave them. She said, well, I'd love to buy one of your prints, but I don't think I can afford it. I think she must have seen the prices online or. And I said, and I made her an 8x10 contact print and I gave it to her.
And they have the book there as well. So
you stopped in.
I haven't actually been there yet, but I now follow them on Instagram. So
yeah, I do want to stop in actually.
I've kind of wanted to take a road trip, in this past year there, just to stay there. I thought that would be fun.
Yeah, I think so too. Her name's Bunny something. I forget her last name.
It could still happen. It looks like a really cute little place. Yep. So, yep. So on this particular image, I love that it's dated March, but it has this little kind of Christmas message painted on the side.
Or just attached. I don't know. Yeah. I guess they leave that up. Like a lot of places leave their Christmas lights up all year.
Right. It's painted on, so why repaint it every year?
This is Las Vegas. I did quite a few in Las Vegas. Everybody thinks, you must love Las Vegas. Actually, the whole huge, gigantic casino neon is not really my thing. It's so industrial. I mean, it's fine. But Las Vegas did have a lot of really nice, what I call mom and pop or folk art motel signs. And I photographed a bunch of them. This sort of being one of them. Not a chain, not a franchise. And a lot of those are going to get saved because the Las Vegas Neon Museum has gotten a lot of them.
Oh, well, that's
have
great.
Them in their boneyard. I don't think they've gotten a whole formal museum going yet, but supposedly they're going to.
They're in the collecting phase, sounds like.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Another one that would function during the day and at night. At night you'd see the shooting stars, the neon would be lit up. But during the day, you don't have the neon functioning, but you do have the painted sign. It's kind of neat. What a crazy design. That again, some local sign shop pulled this one out of their head. And ranch house is a name for motels that I've probably photographed 5 or 6 ranch houses. Just like I've photographed a number of Bel Airs, number of ranch, number of there's a whole bunch. Which again, they're not franchises. Each one's an individual person who kind of hit upon the same name, Cactus Motel.
Sure.
Bel Air is a famous favorite of mine. Bel Air motels. Got at least probably 8 or 9 Bel Air motels.
Collections of different Bel Airs.
Yeah. Which is a favorite thing of mine to do is typologies, which is a fancy word for collections.
Similar, but very different.
Very different. Look at that one.
This one's wild.
It is wild. This was abandoned. The motel was gone, but the sign was still there. And this was in Mesa, Arizona. It's along the Highway 60 coming into Mesa, Tempe, Phoenix. That, God, I must have 8 or 9 motel signs that are in my books. In Vanishing Vernacular, the Starlight with 3 motel divers, women in bathing suits. That's on same strip. La Mesita with the glass blocks, same highway, same strip. Highway 60, great strip. Kind of like Route 66, and well, all of Route 66, but Albuquerque,
Right.
Gallup. Tucumcari has got one of the best remaining sections, in my opinion, of Route 66. Although people have become so conscious of Route 66 that all the way from Oklahoma, Chicago, actually all the way to LA, well, all these little towns are really trying to capitalize on being Route 66 and are doing everything, restoring some of their neon signs. You know, we talked earlier about that one, the Grove Motel, which was abandoned. You know, and I was saying a lot of these are disappearing. And that's what brought up the idea of the neon museums. A lot of them are getting collected and saved. You know, the ideal is if they get restored and left in place. You know, I think that's the best, but of course that's not going to happen most of the time.
Right.
So second best to that is to collect the actual sign. And equally second best is to make a good photograph of them.
Well, I know, and you've been collecting them for years with your camera.
That's right.
Just not, it's a little easier to collect them for you.
Little easier, but it is the idea that I love to say about typologies or collecting. One of the inherent characteristics of photography is it's really good at collecting and comparing, which is the idea of typology, which is the idea of Hildenburg Becker. You know, their water tower pictures. People kind of tend to think they invented the typology, which they did take in a certain direction. But the typology came with photography. I mean, there are typologies back in the 1840s, you know, photographers photographing, you know, a set of objects or subjects. So photography to me is really perfect at collecting and comparing. And a couple times people, like there's one that's in my volume 1, I think, the Palomino Motel in Tucumcari. He'd had a new sign made, and it's a horse, cowboy on a horse. He'd asked me if I wanted to buy the sign. And that had happened before. The Marie's truck stop, a big neon truck that's in Diesels and Dinosaurs, you know, that was abandoned, and I could have gotten that. I would have needed a semi truck to haul it, and I would have needed a place to store it. And at the time, I thought maybe I could convince my parents to let me put it in their backyard. But I decided I'm not going to actually collect these things. That goes in a whole nother direction. I'll do my collecting with the photography and leave the collecting to people like my friends, Lenny Davidson, the Philadelphia Neon Museum, because he did do that. And that's what he has done in Philadelphia for 40 years. He has collected a lot of these classic Philadelphia neon signs. And he has them on display.
Well, one of the cool things about the way that you're collecting them is you're freezing them in time at that particular moment that you photographed it. Sure, they could come back and repaint them and restore them, but
yeah, which I love. It's back to the composition of the picture. They exist in a place. And I like the place being part of the picture, like this one. You know, I like the composition of this. I like the added on little marquee thing again that they've drug in. They've just added out the arrow. Look at the 2 arrows. There's the clean, quiet, reasonable rates with that arrow. And those are things you just rent from people. You rent those sign, marquee sign. And then they've got the sign arrow that was designed into the original sign. But, you know, arrows, you know, one thing I would just point out in a whole bunch of my pictures, you know, here I said, you guys had an arrow of mine. I mean, I love, it's a theme that runs through the arrows, you know. This is, you know, a fairly simple one, but whatever. And you can see how this sign is painted to function during the day. This one actually kind of cracks me up. I love the way they put the TV way up in the air in its own little kind of niche.
It's like
They want you to,
really far away, you know there's a TV
They want you to see that when they're coming down the road. They want you to see it from a ways away. But, and again, I think this is a good example of how I really like the composition in these pictures a lot of times. The arrows on the ground, the flag, the kind of pitched roofs over the rooms.
Russell, Kansas.
Yep. Actually, might be going through Russell next week. We'll see.
As part of your road trip, Russell's in the.
I think Russell's, it might be one of the routes we take. I'm not sure. Which means I will check and see what's still there.
Still there. It's done.
Visiting old friends. This one is Salida, and I know it's not there anymore. But again, this is definitely 50s. Getting way more flamboyant in the shapes. No longer just this kind of rectangular little sign. Although it's still got the original kind of rectangle motor hotel part to it.
I was gonna say, does it actually have little light bulbs that would screw into that yellow kind of V shape?
Yeah, which you would see a lot of times combo signs, neon and bulbs. And a lot of times the bulbs would be animated. They would do what is called a chaser sequence. They would go through a sequence. I doubt if this one did that, but
But that was another one of the design possibilities. We have another arrow here.
Yeah, and again, this was probably built in stages. The original sign was probably the Ranch Motel rectangle, which would have been 1940s. And again, it's what they call a suitcase sign, just a simple rectangle. Although they did some nice things, the script letters for ranch and the way they turned it into a rope in terms of the painting is kind of nice. And then my guess would be in the 50s, I'll bet they added that arrow. That's a much more flamboyant 50s arrow.
Make sure people know where that motel is.
Yeah, in case you're not sure where. And then you can see again the things getting added: Visa, MasterCard, kitchenettes was probably added also. And of course, this is one of the ones we did the little additional prints. This is also on Highway 60 in Mesa, Arizona, the strip of motels I was talking about. My guess is that originally the Roadrunner was probably a neon Roadrunner up there. Late 50s, plexiglass plastic signs started to happen. Especially in the 60s, and especially all your chain motels, and that era starts to really get going. Those signs to me became less interesting, partly because they're all the same, and partly because they were using less neon and more plastic plexiglass, which, there's some nice ones, but mostly they're kind of more boring, really. And that's a plexiglass Roadrunner up there painted.
So do you think maybe the original Roadrunner in neon broke and they would have just replaced it with that, or?
Possibly. Yeah, exactly. Part of the disadvantage of neon is that a big hailstorm will wipe out a bunch of neon.
Oh, yeah. I would imagine.
Vandals, kids throwing rocks at it. So that's a problem. So yeah, it could have gotten broken, and they just said, forget it, let's get one of these made. Although there still is neon, Roadrunner is still neon.
Right.
And you can see around the Roadrunner is a bunch of light bulbs too, like we saw in that sign earlier.
I'm a fan of that one.
I have a show right now in a gallery in Amsterdam of these pictures. He sent me two, asking which would he printed an announcement, which I haven't seen yet. Did I want to use, what did I think? This one or the neon one that I just brought you a print yesterday? And I said, let's do that one. So that's how he did the announcement with the one I brought you.
The print you brought yesterday.
Yeah, the Sun Valley neon at night. But he really liked this one, and Iana really likes this one. And I like it, but it's different. Again, this is 50s, style. And it's still there. I went by there not too long ago. It's been repainted, it's changed, but still there. Also Socorro,
1983,
same trip, same time,
2014,
fairly recent.
Kansas.
Yeah, the classic Highway 36 that goes from
So I like to,
Colorado across Kansas all the way. A bunch of neat motels were along that highway, which I photographed.
so this one's kind of interesting in that the actual motel sign is kind of fading and the paint is chipping, but the part about the miniature golf seems like it was more recently added or maintained.
Which it was.
So,
That's been added on. Free Wi-Fi has been added on. Those 5 red dots and a black background. I don't know what that is, but that's been added. So you can see the original structure. Again, this would have been a 1950s sign.
Mhm.
It just gets adapted with add-ons, basically.
Yeah. And miniature golf is their thing.
And yeah,
Another more recent one, 2014, the
right.
Sands Motel.
Yep. Big Arrow.
Mhm.
Kind of. I don't know if that motel's open or not. The sign's definitely losing some things, losing its neon.
It's kind of fading into the clouds.
Yeah, it's disappearing. I think it's still actually functioning in the motel. But yeah, I like the composition. I like the picture. Okay, Sands, another collection. I've photographed probably 15 Sands motels.
Mhm. Another popular motel name.
Yep, definitely. As is the Desert or the Desert Inn, or various versions of Desert. This one is still there in Vaughn, and I think it's still going. I think Vaughn was really interesting. It's still, I love going to Vaughn. It's a dying town. It's still got people living in it, but it used to be a railroad town, and the railroad still goes through, but it's not a railroad town anymore. So the town's really kind of dying. But it's interesting in that 3 US highways converge, and the main street of Vaughn is Highway 54, 60, and 285. And then the other end of town, they branch again, separate. So here's a town that had 3 US highways converge and go through town, which meant it had a lot of motels. When I first photographed in Vaughn, and in fact, the first picture I made that started this whole motel sign series was on a trip in 1979. And I started using color in 2.25. And I photographed the Yucca, the Bel Air, 1 or 2 others. And then I went back. That was 1979. I went back 1988, did this one. But it had a classic collection of motels, and some of them were the classic names: Bel Air, Sands, and I'm forgetting a bunch of others. Most of them have closed, and most of them, the signs are gone. I think there's 3 motels still functioning there: the Bel Air Desert Motel, and a newer travel lodge that they've built.
Mm.
But I always loved Main Street of Vaughn with its collection of 20 motels or whatever on 3 US highways. Part of the reason I think they have disappeared, just along with the general disappearance of a lot of motels, is people started driving farther. Now, if you're going through Vaughn, chances are, if you're going cross country, you'll go all the way up to Santa Rosa on the interstate and maybe stay in a motel, or you go all the way to Clovis, or you'll go all the way to Berlin. People are going bigger distances. And
Right.
so chances are you wouldn't need to make a stop in Vaughn, you'd go farther. And I think that's partly what's killed Vaughn, is people will just go on to Roswell or go on.
Right. You're not on the 2-lane highway, you're on the super highway, going a little faster.
Cars go, people drive more distances.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But again, I like the composition, I like the church.
Yeah.
In the background there. I'm actually I'm trying to get a good drone picture of the strip in Vaughan. And what I've been doing is I print the drone picture, and then I'm going to have 5 or 6 of the motel pictures in a row underneath the bird's eye view. And I've got one I think is going to work, where I've got the Yucca Motel that I took a picture of in 1979, and a contemporary Yucca Motel sign picture I made. And then I'm doing the drone picture too. It's all in the developmental stages.
And you had started doing the drone work with your son. Are you doing that? Are you?
I need him because
Okay.
He's the pilot. I can't fly him. I can't
Fly and photograph at the same time.
Thinking of photographing, so he has to go with me. I hire him and we go, and the pandemic kind of just put an end to that. So I haven't. Last drone pictures I made right before the pandemic with him in Vaughan, actually, and Muleshoe and a few other places. Lone Star, Texas, and although that's not in Texas, that was in Nevada. Oh, beautiful. That is a 50s sign. This is Route 66, Oklahoma. Classic 50s. That arrow. Still a well-maintained motel, still going strong.
Hey, it looks well kept, and that's 2015. So
at least back then it was still
right.
It was Skyliner.
And speaking of motels that are, I assume that motel is no longer.
I think it was not functional.
There, it appears that the bush took over.
Yeah, and a lot of times the signs last longer than the motel building even. Many times the building has already been bladed away, but the sign, they haven't gotten to the sign yet. So that's what's happening here. Although all the neon's obviously busted out. But again, back to the very simple rectangle, which means this was a 1940s vintage.
And I love on this one that the neon is missing, but you can still read the name of the motel. And there's just kind of this beautiful patina left from.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. These museums that are collecting a lot of these signs, like my friend Lenny with the Philadelphia Neon Museum. Some of his signs he collects, he leaves it with the paint kind of weathering. He'll repair the neon if it needs it. But he even likes to, as much as possible, keep the vintage neon, because the neon changed. Some of the newer neon tubes were a little different than the old ones. So he's really into, if at all possible, keeping the original painting and not repainting the sign. Sometimes he does because it's too weathered. But for the reason just that sometimes just the patina and the way the paint looks, having weathered, is so beautiful in and of itself. That's one thing I think Carlos Garcia in Albuquerque, my guess is they're going to restore their signs, like the Arrow Motel. And I know this because Tom Hyland, the person I know, is the sign painter that they've been hiring. And he says, oh yeah, I'm repainting a lot of their signs. But it's an interesting, there's a guy in Reno, Will Durham, who's also collecting Nevada neon, and he wants to eventually open a Reno neon museum. In discussions I've had with him and with my friend Lenny, there's this kind of debate about, how much do you restore? When do you restore? When do you try to leave it in its original condition? I don't have that dilemma. I take the picture of whatever it is. There you go.
In the case of this one, I'd like to see it stay as is.
Yeah. I mean, even the Indian chief he's weathered, but it's kind of neat. And the lettering is, I think, really beautiful weathered. That sort of aquamarine, faded.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with the whole bush, the Valerie and the sign, what can you say? And then, of course, I like the little detail of the 76 orange globe.
Mm-hmm.
There's your franchise. There's your chain.
Right. It's encroaching. And here you are with your neon.
Right. And you people wouldn't know, but that says survival of the fittest.
Mm.
And if you look, of is each of the words is a different color neon. So the is it's clear glass with neon, THE. Survival is a certain pink. Fittest is a different kind of orange. So anyway, that's what that says. And it's a little hard to decipher, but it's, if you see it in person, each of the words is a different color. And that's because I love the grasshopper. I think it's just such a classic shape. And of course, the open-ended question is, are the insects going to live longer, or humans? Who's going to survive? We all know it's going to be the insects.
Probably.
Probably. So, and again, this one's on here. It's during the daytime, so you're not seeing the neon really well. But if it was turned off, there's a bunch of different colored neon, and it really has a presence whether the neon is on or not, I think.
Well, you mentioned you're using the actual colored, are the tubes colored or?
Well, sometimes there's a powder
Okay.
coating, and different coatings of powder will glow different colors. Sometimes the powder is just white. Sometimes it's blue or it has a color. And then sometimes the glass itself is actually colored, like the eyeball here.
Right. He appears to be, or.
And the antenna is green. And like the arrow that used to be at photoeye, there's a little section in that arrow of ruby red, which is what the red here is. And that's actually colored glass also. So the colored glass is the rarest. It's handmade in Italy or Australia. And it's harder to bend, and it's way more expensive. But people really like it, like ruby reds, what that red's called. It's just a beautiful red. So sometimes people really want me to use the colored glass. It's a lot more expensive. It's a lot harder to bend.
So here's the book. So if you're perusing the online exhibition, once you get to the end, you see the book is available for order, and you can click there and buy it right off our website, or you can call us and talk about it and ask questions. You can also find the gallery contact information on this page here. So if you would like to discuss, there it is. And then there's at the very end of the exhibition, you can collapse it into a grid.
I like that you did that. I love the grid.
That's a fun element. And you have some large scale pieces that are similar to this, only it's
12.
Actually multiple motels printed on one sheet of paper.
Right, and they're 12. There's 12 motels. Yeah, when I had that show back with photoeye 2012 or whatever, we showed 2 of those, I think.
And we have those on our website. If you go to the website, in the gold bar on the left, you have online exhibitions. In the center, it says artist. Those are the represented artists. So there's portfolios of all of the represented artists there, including more of Steve's work. And then to the right of that is our showcase, where you can find work by more artists. So when everybody has time, they should go through, spend a little more time with the work. So Steve, I'm curious if for whatever reason photography, this isn't going to happen, but if photography didn't exist anymore tomorrow, I don't know what the circumstance would be. What do you think you would do instead of photography?
Probably just roll over and die. But
well, don't do that.
If it weren't for dying, I'd rather be dead. That's some song I just recently heard, a Dan Hicks song. If it weren't for dying, I'd rather be dead. He hates because his girlfriend has left him or whatever. No, I actually was thinking about that. What if we don't go on this trip next week? What if I don't go on these road trips anymore?
Mhm.
My photographing mostly depends on going on road trips.
Right.
What if we don't go because of car problems, or I start to get to where the road trips are getting harder and harder? And what am I going to do?
Mhm.
And I actually been wondering, I guess I would build more stone things out here, like the stone water tank that the arrows that the grasshoppers mounted on.
Mhm.
I've
Mhm.
got another stone planter area I need to build. Uh, Maybe I'd start bending more neon pieces like the yucca. Well, I don't know, I'd be lost.
You'd be making something though. That would,
Yeah, I'd be busy. I have to be busy.
yes.
I have to be doing something. I mean, yeah. I mean, I like to read, and sometimes I go, Steve, just don't do anything today. Just read. But it's hard. I read. I have my 2 hours, hour or two reading, and I
Mhm.
can work on something. I could always just go through all my. Well, if you said photography didn't exist, you mean it already did exist, but it doesn't exist anymore?
I hadn't really thought about that part.
Because I can go through all my old stuff. In fact, I've been doing that in the pandemic too.
Reorganize the prints and negatives again.
All my bushes, these pictures I did black and white, I call my bush series,
Yes.
which I did this toning and crazy stuff. And I have a bunch of those prints. I'm actually scanning those and making some digital and working those up digitally, especially a bunch of them that I never really printed. In other words, I'm diving into my archive, I guess.
Right. So you've recently been able to go out on a few little road trips, but there was probably a period of time early pandemic where you were maybe sticking a little closer to home. So you used that time to reorganize and still work on photography. Just
Yeah, I had plenty of material I had shot and hadn't worked up. Like a lot of those horizontal panoramic type things of
yes.
murals. I've been working on a number of those. I still have got some that I need to work on because they take a bunch of time. It takes me, not steady 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, but it takes me a couple of weeks sometimes to put one of those together. So I've got those. I still had some drone work that I had done with Luke, and I still have one or two of those I have to work those up also. They're stitched together. We put the drone up in the air. We'll sometimes shoot 30 or 40 frames. And then the final composite gets stitched together from those. So I've had a lot of work to work on that I already had shot. And I still have some of that.
Well, I don't see you running out of photographic inspiration or projects anytime soon.
What I would like to do is not have to go on like these 4,000-mile road trips, and be able to photograph. And I have some drone pictures I'd like to make that are, out here where I live. Some maybe more landscape kinds of things. So
sure.
I've got some ideas of things to do that photographically. So, but there's always neon, and there's always building things out of rocks and concrete. And
making things.
I'm not going to build another house, but I'm sitting in here in this building. I'm sitting in. We built. So it's our studio, and our house is over there. We built that first, and it's Adobe, and this is Adobe. We built this second. I can't believe we did it. Actually, we built both.
So when you built it, when you say you built it, you designed it or you physically built it?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Designed it and physically built it.
And did you hire other contractors as well, or did you do
the roof? We hired a hot tar roof for the house originally, and we recently had it spray foamed. So that was done. We did the first coat of plaster on the house, inside and out, and it's this 3-coat plastering. There's 3 coats. We said, forget this, and we ended up hiring a plaster crew that finished the house inside and out. And then when we built the studio, we hired a plastering crew. So we had that done. This is a cement slab. We had a concrete company come in that day and cement trucks come. That got poured.
Mhm.
But, you know, I dug the foundation trenches by hand. We stacked every single adobe. We built all the window frames, laid the brick floor in the house, put the beams up, you know, in the house, those beams,
Ah,
you know.
nice.
So what we didn't do is like the final roofing material. Well, we built the roof,
Mhm.
but had the companies do the roof and plastering.
That's probably wise when it comes to details such as the final part of the roof.
Yeah. I mean, I can't do a hot tar roof.
I wouldn't
I mean,
I wouldn't trust myself to do that anyways.
part of the studio has a sloping tin roof, and we did that. I put the tin insulation, but I can't do the hot tar or the torch down roof, which is what the studio has.
No.
And the plastering, you know, when we did the house, the first coat, you know, we had friends helping us. And when it comes to doing a good job, especially when you get to the final coat,
Mhm.
you have to have a crew. You can't do a good job. You know, it took us 6 weeks to plaster the first coat of the house inside and out. Once we hired the plastering crew, in 1 week, they did the final 2 coats inside and outside. So, and the final coat's really beautiful. It's really nicely done. So, yeah. I was very attached to the idea of doing everything yourself.
Mhm. Mhm.
Just like I am with my photography, that I never have anybody print mine unless I have to, because it's a big print somehow that I can't print.
Right.
But for the most part, I want to do it myself. And that's why I learned neon, same thing. I want to make these neon pieces, but I'd like to be able to bend the neon myself. So I learned how to do it. So I guess I'm a real believer in DIY, do it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that.
Do it yourself. And that
And I
carried over, wanting to build your own house. Why did I want to build my own house and meet Lynn, who she was up for it? I think because I grew up in the back to the land hippie era in Mendocino County in the late 60s, San Francisco, Haight-Ashbury. Somehow I got bit by the back to the land bug, which included building your own house.
Well, and you did it. And
Did it. And neither of my kids are going to do it. And neither of them are going to live out here in the middle of nowhere up a really crappy dirt road. So I don't know what to say.
well, you have a great place to call home.
Yeah. As long as I can still get in and out up the dirt road and back. I don't know what might happen when I'm 85 and can't drive anymore, but we'll see. Cross that bridge. Cross that bridge.
So Steve, if there are any photographers out there that are aspiring to publish their first photo book, do you have any advice for them?
Look at a lot of photo books. If you maybe can have access to somebody you can ask questions and talk to, there are people like Virginia Swanson, who's published books about that, designing and doing your own book. She has that book. Darius Himes.
Yes, called Publish Your Own Photo Book.
Right. Read those. And then I think just first thing is, have an idea, have some pictures that deserve being in a book, or you feel deserve being in a book. I guess that's the most important thing. Right. Have some work that you are interested in and would like to get it out there in a book form. That has to come first. And then you can figure out how to do it. There's it's a lot easier today than it was back when diesels and dinosaurs. So many more options today. Self-publish, blurb books, a lot more publishers to approach and see if they want to do your book. So in a way, there's a lot more options today. But yeah, I guess look at a lot of photo books. I mean, that's also really important. I mean, I think you learn photography from books as much as doing it. You've got to be doing both. But for me, you know, and all my friends, we grew up with photo books.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as photoeye is evidence of, that's gone crazy today. There's so many books.
No. So many publishers, so many books.
And so many self-published books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, back in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, when I was really coming of age, it seems like you knew every book that got published each year, you know, and we all saw the same books. And,
right.
Know, have you seen the new Gary Winogrand book, or seen Diane Arbus's book, or Lou Bolt's? You know, it wasn't like it is today, which is, it's not better or worse, it's just different.
Right. No, so many publishers, from these little teeny tiny publishing houses to these more kind of corporate style publishers, self-publishing, handmade. With Diesels and Dinosaurs, how did you actually end up getting that published? What was
that was a combination, self-published and forming a company. You know, I worked at a place called the ASUC studio on the Berkeley campus, where Richard Mizrak was. We ran this little darkroom for students to use. Mm-hmm. Not formal classes through the university, but the student union ran this. So we ran the darkroom, and we would teach people how to use the darkroom. And I was working there. Richard was working there. Roger Minnick was working there. And it was great, because if I wanted to go out and photograph for Diesels and Dinosaurs, I could take off for 2 weeks and somebody else would pick up my shifts. Mm-hmm. But what was really important was it was a group of serious people, Richard, Roger. We were all learning photography, and we were all into photo books. And Richard, his first book was self-published. Roger's published Delta West through Scrimshaw Press, a little company. And I and two people, we started a publishing company, Long Run Press. Mm. My idea was we were going to publish books. Turns out the first one we were going to publish was mine, which was Diesels and Dinosaurs. And we did. After that, none of us wanted to be in the publishing industry. I wanted to just do my photographs, and the other people didn't want to. So that was the only book I'd ever published. So it was a self-published book in a way, but it was a company that we started.
Right.
And I've actually been thinking lately, you know, I have an idea for a book or two or three that I could do. And, mm-hmm. you know, Velvet Cell is going to do another one. And I have another idea for a book or two that they could do if they're interested. But mm-hmm. if not, you know, I could go through the whole rigmarole trying to get George Thompson and see if he's interested. But I could revive Long Run Press again. And
that could be fun.
Maybe do another Long Run Press. I like the title of the publishing company, Long Run Press.
It's a good name.
It's defunct, but it could be revived. And, I don't know. I don't know if I have that in me or not yet right now. We'll see.
The possibilities are endless.
They're there. It's just, which ones do I take off the table and run with? It's nice having other people like Yana, Velvet Cell, or George Thompson, or UNN Press, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. For the reasons I said earlier, it's a collaboration.
Right. Having the
editors, and with a designer like David Skolkin, or mm-hmm. back with Gone, it was Robin Mundi, and I forget the other name. There's two designers. You know, that's great. Mm-hmm. So, of course, if I formed Long Run Press, maybe I hire Joanna to kind of take care of certain things, and maybe I could hire David Skolkin to design.
Right. Maybe you don't have to, kind of like putting the tar on the roof of your house. Maybe you don't have to do everything.
Yes. Yeah. I've lost some of the necessity of having to do it myself. I'm not going to build another house, that's for sure.
Why?
If I hadn't started that when I was 35 years old, forget it. I can't imagine that now, but
Right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Steve. I really appreciate it.
yeah.
And enjoy your road trip. I hope you get to see some of your old friends out there, the motel signs.
Well, you'll hear about it if I do. See the results, maybe.
Yeah, no, I look forward to seeing the results and hearing about it. So
Okay.
have fun and have a great night, and I will
Yeah.
talk to you soon.
Okay, good. This was fun.
Thank you for watching Photoeye Conversations. I hope you enjoyed the virtual tour of Steve's online exhibition and other stories. Again, we have signed copies of the book available for $35, as well as prints of the work. So go back to, well, go to the homepage of our website. You'll see Steve's online exhibition there. Or if you're on our website, click on the online exhibitions tab, and you can view Steve's online exhibition as well as our past online exhibitions. And if you have any questions, please send me an email at gallery@photoeye.com. Again, thanks for listening and have a good night.